But I'll hammer it with my fist. The time is 7 o'clock. I'd like to call this Upton Candidates Night to order here, 2019. So I want to thank all of you for being here, and I especially want to thank the candidates for getting the nomination papers, having them get signed, turning them in, and running for selectmen. Typically, when we have a candidates night, we always have candidates who run opposed to each other. But every now and then, we'll have an extra unopposed candidate. We don't happen to have that tonight. So the three candidates that you have here today are the ones who are running for selectmen. Okay? So let me just introduce them real quick. Way over to my left is Mr. David Ross. Okay? And to my left here is Mrs. Michelle Antinarelli. And to my right is Mrs. Maureen Dwinell. And they are the three people who are running for selectmen. Okay, so let me go quickly through what the ground rules are. Once I'm done talking and we know what the ground rules are, each candidate will be given 3 minutes to make an opening statement, and we drew that by lots, okay? Then after that, each of you will have an opportunity to ask questions of the candidates. Now, I gotta make this as clear as I can. It is your job to ask questions. It is their job to answer questions. It is not your job to make statements about how you feel about the world or the town of Upton or whatever. So therefore, you have a maximum of 1 minute to ask your question. Think in terms of 30 seconds, okay? When you get to 30 seconds, I'll give you this. When you get to 45, I'll say, come on. At 1 minute, if you're not done, I'm gonna say, sit down, and if you're not done, you're not done, and someone else will ask a question. We've had too many times in the past where people have just felt the need where they have to make their statement about whatever. If you want to make a statement about whatever, you know what you have to do? Get nomination papers, have them signed, turn them in, and sit up here. Okay? So please be respectful of that. Ask questions. I've told the candidates that the Upton Bloomer Girls, by the way, thank you Upton Bloomer Girls for sponsoring it. They will be in the back, hold it up like 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever, to give them an idea. I also have a little clock on here too. I have moved to technology with some things. I also want to thank the fire department for allowing us to use this room. This is the perfect room to have this. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's just the right size. So, like I said, think 30 seconds for your question, up to 1 minute, and that's it. When you have a question, each candidate will have a chance to respond for 2 minutes. Now, sometimes questions are for a particular candidate, and that's okay, they can respond. But the other two might want to respond in kind with 2 minutes. And then after that, if people want a 30-second rebuttal, I'll give them that opportunity to do that. Obviously, you know the way things are supposed to work and the way I want them to work in terms of the appropriateness of the questions. Okay, so keep everything on an upper tone. That's the best way this thing works for everybody. I don't mind tough questions, but they have to be fair questions, and we have to always remember that. They're the ones putting themselves out on the line here, taking the risk. One of them, in a few weeks, will be the next selectman. 2 of them will not be. And that's a hard thing to do, to run for something and to not be the one that gets elected. So always remember that as you're thinking about the way in which you frame your questions, please, okay? Because this is a hard thing to do. Alrighty, so are there any questions from the audience about the ground rules before we begin? Okay, any questions from the candidates? No? Okay, great. Okay, so let's begin. And the opening statement, again for 3 minutes, will be by Dave Ross. Go ahead, Dave.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you to the Bloomer Girls. Thank you to all of you for coming out tonight and taking this interest in our town and where we're going to go over the next couple of years. Briefly about myself, for those of you who don't know me, I was born and raised in Grafton and lived there for a number of years. When I was in Grafton, I served for 5 years on the Finance Committee, including a term as chairman. I then served a 3-year term on the Board of Selectmen. At the end of my term, I decided, or we as a family were moving, so I had decided it wouldn't be right to seek re-election and then resign midway through my term. If I'm elected to a position for a 3-year term, I feel it's only right to serve for that 3 years. My wife is the director of guidance at Holliston High and was familiar with the local school systems in the area. And we were really impressed with the work that has been done by Mendon and Upton over the last decade plus to develop a really wonderful school system here. So we targeted Upton as a place to move to, and we moved here in 2015. And in the last year, I've served on the Economic Development Committee and also on the working group for the town center. If any of you were at town meeting, I gave the presentation on that vision that the group worked so hard to develop. And what I really liked about that process is that we included input from all the citizens that wanted to participate. And it wasn't 100% what I wanted, but it was what the consensus was and the group was. And that's what we presented. And that's what I promised, always listen. I'm not coming into this position with any preset ideas, agenda items. I'm going to listen to what people say, and then I'm going to make my decision. I will always fall back on the experiences I've had in Grafton and in the private sector, where I run a finance team covering 3 different offices for Warner Brothers, to say what can I pull from my experience there to bring into the town side, potentially helping to enhance how we do things from an operational standpoint, or ways to be creative in going out and finding new sources of revenue or areas that we could potentially target to reduce spend. So on Tuesday, I would be very appreciative if you could find a couple minutes in your day to go down to Nipmunk and to cast your ballot for me. Thank you.
Okay, next will be Maureen Dwinell.
Yes, I'd also like to thank the Bloomer girls and everyone that showed up tonight to take an interest in the town and what we have to offer. And I would like to review some of the issues as I see them. Managing the financial impact of the growth is critical for the town. One priority that I have is to try and get a vote of the Board of Selectmen to modify the accounting procedures by accepting Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 2D. By doing so, it would allow the town to collect taxes so that it would, the town to collect taxes at full value on newly constructed homes and businesses. And this would add to estimated receipts and new growth for the following fiscal year. I will work with departments affected to implement this process and planning. Long-range financial planning for our town when elected, I will work with the financial departments and committees with many needs of capital items that are on the horizon. We must have a proactive plan. We must work to expand the commercial base so we can stabilize the residential taxes. Technology is important to help us manage our government more efficiently and to communicate more effectively. And communication is crucial in government today. When elected, I would make myself available to all departments, boards, committees, and to all citizens of Upton. Please vote on May 14th.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Michelle?
Hi, Michelle Antonelli. Again, thank you to the Bloomer Girls, of course, to the fire department, and to all of you for coming out tonight and sharing this moment and sharing your questions and concerns about our government going forward. I've moved to Upton more than 20 years ago with my husband and my 2 daughters. I raised my girls here, and they have made their homes here. So I'm highly invested in making sure that Upton continues to flourish, that the school systems remain strong, that our public services, our fire department, our police department remain strong and remain professional and remain cutting edge in their technologies and strategies for doing their jobs. I've participated in the Upton community in various ways. My daughter played soccer, a lot of soccer. My other daughter was very much involved in dance. And more recently, we've become involved in the Earth Day cleanup. We're invested, we're all invested. My husband's business is 3 minutes away from our home. We're staying here, we're retiring here. And we want to make sure that everybody who lives here has that same opportunity. I'm very concerned about what's happening with our taxes and that we have such a high residential tax burden as opposed to very little commercial and business development. I'm an educator. I work in related services in a local public school system. I work in special education. I'm well aware of what's happening in schools, and I love the students I work with, I love the teachers I work with, and I love all of the administrative personnel with whom I work. So I understand what it takes to make Mendon Upton schools as strong and as professional and as committed as they are and successful. They're successful on all fronts, athletics, academics. They're tops. I'm experienced in nonprofit management. I'm director of the Carroll Center for the Blind for Community Education Services. So I was working with a very diverse and itinerant workforce. I had a lot on my plate, and it was very exciting, and I have 1 minute. Okay. I also worked in my lifetime as an independent contractor. I'm currently a town employee in special education. I'm a public policy advocate. I believe in people. I believe in supporting people and helping people. And what's most important that you need to know is that I've spent the past year invested in Upton, going to numerous meetings, going to committees across the board, spending my time and energy and interest in finding out what the issues are here in Upton, what questions and concerns people have, and what suggestions they have. So any ideas that I'll be talking about tonight have come from all of you and listening to all of you. And I thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, great open statements from everybody. Okay, so. All right, so now it's time for the audience, so just raise your hand, and remember, after I call on you, and please stand up and ask your question again as succinctly as you can, because you do have a maximum of 1 minute. So, anybody have a question? And someone's got to go first. Go ahead.
Rick McGuire. I just asked as the beach person candidate that's up there. Here's the question. What Upton committee meetings have you participated in as a member and or as a citizen who wanted to find out what the issues are? And can you tell over the last year, and can you give us some indication of how many of these sessions you attended or what you participated in?
Okay, thank you. So why don't we go in reverse order since this is a general type question, so Michelle, go ahead.
As I put out in my advertisement, I've spent more than 80 hours in committee meetings over the past actually 42 weeks, 11 different committees and commissions, and I can list them if you like. I've just been invested, I've been involved. I'm on the Economic Development Committee, and I'm on the Electronic Voting Committee, and I have to say that most of you know my face because I've been sort of that nuisance question asker at your meetings, and I apologize if they seem to be nuisance questions, but there's information that we all need to know, and that was why I was there asking those questions. Does anybody need any more details than that? I mean, do you need to know them meetings?
Okay.
11 different committees.
Great, okay, good. Okay, Dave, go ahead.
Over the past year, I've been a member of the Economic Development Committee, so we've been meeting on a fairly regular basis for that. Served on the working group, and as part of that, I've had to attend a handful of Board of Selectmen meetings, and I've been to a couple of school committee meetings as I have a child in the school system. To be frank and be honest, I have a small young family at home, so really I get about 1 night a week to be able to go out. So it's hard for me to be able to go out multiple nights to stay up to speed on everything that's happening.
I've attended some of the selectmen's meetings and the finance committee meetings, and I have met with the police department, the fire department, the DPW, the finance committee chair I met with to get a feel of where the finances are in town. And I have also met with the town manager. I had 2 sessions with the town manager, 2.5 hours the first time, and 3.5 hours the second time, and I'm sorry I took so much of this time, but he seems to have a good head on his shoulders and full of information.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
David Brooks, 3 Primary Circle. This question is directed for Michelle, but I hope the other 2 can answer. When you presented the second of your petitions at town meeting, you didn't really have the time to explain its purpose, but I understood the intention would be to move the supervisory authority of town employees from the town manager to the Board of Selectmen, which seems odd as the manager is presumably appointed to manage. Maybe I misunderstood what I read. But was that the intention? And if so, what's the rationale of changing the supervisory authority? And would you intend to pursue the change in authority if you were elected?
So no, just to clarify, the purpose of the article was actually to move the employees who report to independent commissions to the authority of the Board of Selectmen and as its agent, the town manager. So it was actually not to short-circuit the role of the town manager, it was actually to expand the role of the town manager. And the purpose of that is that we have such a discrepancy, for instance, in pay scales between different departments. We have a $59,000 a year for a full-time firefighter who risks his life going into burning buildings, or her life going into burning buildings, and we have, for comparison's sake, we have a recreation commission director who's, recreation director who's paid $52,000 a year for a 31-hour per week, and certainly his job is responsible. I just see the inequity between, working 31 hours per week and working a full-time work week. So that's one of the inequities that I see. But more importantly is the liability that we assume that when we have these independent commissions that are supervising employees, they are not experts, they are not experts in personnel, they're not experts in all the protections that those employees require, and it's just as important for the town to be protected against any acts or commissions or anything that they would incidentally do wrong, as well as to protect the employees themselves. They have no recourse if they're fired or if they're treated unfairly by our supervisor in the department, or if the supervisor is not treated well by the commission, they have no recourse. So that is the purpose of the article.
Thank you.
And
It's clear.
I would only pursue it if that's in the interests of what the voters say.
Okay. Maureen, did you have any comment on that, or?
Well, actually, the Board of Selectmen are facilitators, and that's why we've hired a town manager. I don't know, I haven't, and I apologize, I haven't read the whole charter for the town manager, but I believe that would take a charter change. And I think it puts too much authority into the hands of the Board of Selectmen, and everybody should be able to take care of their own departments.
Okay. David, any comment on that particular issue?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a definitive opinion on that right now. When I served in Grafton, we had the majority of those positions were under the town manager. But that was because we had gone through as a town and set up a charter and set up our organization that way. Upton did a similar approach here. We have a Town Manager Act, and we decided to set up the operations of our town in a certain manner. I would need to understand why we did that and talk to those individuals. There was most likely at that time a good reason for doing that, and then explore what the pros and cons would be of making that type of change. So I don't have an opinion now, but if I was on the board, I would research it and hope to have an opinion in the future.
Okay, great. Next question. Sir?
Yes, I'm Craig Weinfuss, 88 Road. During the last town hall meeting, we voted to sell, lease, or transfer the church building, and it kind of potentially puts the church building at risk for demolition. So I was curious if you, all three candidates, if you support the preservation of the church building, and if so, how would you like to go about that process of preserving the church if you do support it?
Okay, so Maureen, since you haven't answered first yet, I'll have you go first on this one. So.
I would like to see it preserved. I think you have to take a look at the cost it's going to be for the town to take on to bring it up to code. I think you have to decide what kind of a use you want for it, if you want a mixed use for it, or if you want a library. It all comes at a cost to the town. But I would like to see it preserved if someone chooses to develop it.
Okay, great. Dave?
Yeah, as you know, I was a member of that committee, and as the committee said, our preference is to preserve the church, and I hold to that. That is the wishes of the committee. I think what's really important about the RFP process is we're going to learn if it's economically feasible to do that.
Right.
So I'm all for if a developer comes in and says, I can save it and we can do this, and if it requires the town to kick something in, with whether it's a TIF or something like that, it's a form of a tax break, a TIF, then I think we should definitely pursue that. But at the same time, if the RFP comes back and every one of them is we need to tear down the church, we don't have to accept any of those RFPs. We can go back and look at how we can potentially change it or make it more attractive. So right now, I've heard the will of the people is to preserve the church, or that's the preferred approach. And regardless, I think, of my personal opinion, my job is to carry forward what the will of the people is.
Hi, so great question. My house is 300 years old, so I well understand the maintenance and upkeep that such an old building would require, but I love my dear old house and I would dearly love to preserve the church. The process right now is out of the hands of actually the selectmen, except for one thing. They have to assign a committee to address the RFP process, and that's going to be critical. If people are invested in that church, they need to request an appointment to that committee. And it's the wish of the Economic Development Committee that it be comprised of community members, working group members, somebody from the EDC or somebody, an appointee. So we're looking for lots of input on that, and it's no longer sort of in the hands of the Economic Development Committee. I would love if there's an angel investor out there that wants to buy that church. I'd be happy to open a nonprofit organization in there and include our children with special needs and intellectual and physical impairments in some sort of money-making venture, competitive employment. I think it would, I would rock that in a minute, a nice coffee house. And if anybody has an angel investor, call me.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next question.
I have a question, it's a little bit related to this last question. One of the possibilities for the downtown would be to build a new facility that has a library and a senior center in it, or a community center, which definitely serves seniors and might have some space for other kinds of groups as well. So I guess my question for all three of you is, what do you think about that pairing of a library and the senior center? Knowing that the library has been on the capital planning budget list since the 1990s, and I'm not really sure about if the senior center has ever asked to be on that list or build a building. And I have been speaking to some people in town, and I've been surprised by some of the things that I'm hearing. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Do you think it's a good match? If it works well, what are your thoughts?
Okay, Dave, why don't you respond to this first?
Yeah, I'm 100% supportive of that idea, of putting those two spaces together. I think the senior center gets a lot of use in the morning and in the early afternoon, whereas the library, although it's open in those hours, probably sees more usage in the afternoon when the kids are out or on the weekends. So building two separate facilities that are operated at different times, I think is really a waste of our assets if we're able to put them together. Also, the proposal that I've seen for that space is much bigger than both of the current spaces combined. So we're going to be able to add all kinds of services and programs that we don't have right now. And I equate it to your first car had a roll-down window and a cassette deck, and then 10 years later you bought a new car with AC and heated seats, and you didn't realize what you were missing out on until you got it. And I think there's a lot out there that we're missing out on by not having the space to be able to do that. Our current senior center, Janice and her team does a great job down there, but it's a very small space compared to local other neighboring senior centers. In the library, we all know has its challenges from accessibility to the space. It's hard to expand it. Again, a lot of great programs run by Matthew and the team there. So I think being able to join that together and have swing space in there, and also have it potentially as the anchor of a downtown revitalization, I'm 100% behind that idea.
Okay. Michelle?
So that's a great question, Lori, and I'm glad you asked it. I know that that's on the cutting edge of what's happening these days. We're all working into shared spaces and sharing, as Dave was pointing out, the same space at different times of day. And on paper, that sounds awesome. And I think the idea is intriguing and exciting. I haven't heard a lot of input from the seniors that would be affected by that kind of a situation. And I share some concerns about some of the privacy issues that you've identified about seniors going in to connect with elder services, to request assistance, And, you know, we can always sort of divide the space as much as possible to provide that kind of privacy, but we're also, you know, looking at a very small space in the proposed building that's going up. I love the idea of having seniors have breakfast and then on lunch in this nice dining room, and then kids coming in and doing, you know, an afternoon snack in a play space. Oh my goodness, I keep getting the 1 minute thing. Rattling on too much, I'm sorry. And I love the idea of the Cub Scouts then going in at night, or the Girl Scouts going in at night and having a spaghetti dinner all in the same place. That's dynamic, that's awesome, and it is cutting edge. I have been looking and researching. I did find one other facility, one other town that has a senior center and library, and I haven't found many details on it, but I'm looking into it, and I'll definitely connect with you on that.
Great. Pleased to know, because until now we hadn't found any.
Right, that's what I said. I said there has to be somebody, so.
All right, all right.
I do support the idea if that's the will of the people. Personally, I think the library and the seniors should be separate.
Okay, all right, great. Next question. Yes, sir. Steve?
Steve Rockenden, I'd like each of you to talk about your position on the question that's on the ballot regarding retail marijuana sales in town.
Okay, so, person who hasn't spoken first for a while is Michelle, so you can go first on this one.
Hot button question. So, you know, obviously the political answer is the will of the people will decide this. And certainly, far be it from me to try to sway anyone's vote one way or another. I think the idea of retail marijuana sales here in Upton really speaks to the economic benefits. We've seen what's happened in Leicester, and I can't say that I've done any investigation about what has happened with crime rates, what has happened with addiction rates, all the things that we're concerned about when we think about retail marijuana. So without that evidence, I can't speak sort of against the idea. Personally, I've never smoked pot, and I enjoin anyone who wants to smoke pot to continue to do what you do, what's right for you. I've just never felt comfortable with that. We voted it down in November, and I would vote against it again.
Okay. Let's see, next would be, let me get this right. Maureen, you can go next on this one.
I would actually vote against it also. I don't feel that it belongs around children or seniors or citizens in town. They have places that have been zoned for this type of business. And I think that's, if it gets passed, that's where it should be, but I don't think it should be around the town at all.
Okay. Dave?
So personally, I'm for medical marijuana, or all recreational marijuana. If that's what you want to do with your free time and your money, go for it. The town of Leicester, the first quarter that they had retail marijuana in their town, received a check from their host agreement of $268,000. That equates to roughly $1 million a year. They also get a piece of the state revenue for that. And there have been preliminary reports that all the local businesses are seeing increased traffic, at least around that marijuana shop, as people come in. Apparently they get hungry, and other things, and so that. So I do think the economic approach, as we're looking to increase more revenue in town, is a very interesting thing to explore. We did see at town meeting that it was, I believe, fairly overwhelming that people did not want retail in town, and when we voted at the statewide election on the ballot question, it was 52 in favor, 48 against. So it seems that the community is right on the middle there. So I don't think at this time Upton is ready for retail marijuana.
Okay. Next question.
Look, am I allowed another?
Yeah, but there was a gentleman in the back. Okay, thank you.
I don't think, sorry I'm late, but.
1 minute to ask your question, right? You have a total of 1 minute to ask your question. I want to make sure you know that.
I'd like to ask the question of the three candidates, do they support overrides?
Oh, okay, nice and quick. Let's see, first would be Maureen, go first on this one.
before I support an override, I think there are other ways to bring money into the town. And one of that would be that chapter I cited, chapter 59, section 2D. That's all new growth in the town, all new construction would pay full taxes and get full assessment at the time of occupancy. From after January 1st, you can go back to July and pick up a house that was completed, and you have until June 30th to pay it, and it's all prorated. I know the first time we did it, we brought in $345,000. And it also added to the new growth, which is part of your budget process.
Thank you. Dave?
I guess there's two types there. So there's the debt exclusion where we go out for a specific item or building and that runs off after a period of time. And that depends on the specific project. When it comes to an operational override, which is your normal 2.5 increase, where you're going to raise your taxes permanently in perpetuity. We did one for the schools about 4 or 5 years ago. To be honest, I think that those overrides, the way that our system is run now in these small towns, we're gonna see one of those every decade. Unless we have a major change to our revenue stream here, which is, and we're not gonna have Dell or EMC move in next week. So unless we're going to be able to bring in a very large corporation that's going to add a lot of taxes to us, I think we're most likely going to be looking at an override in the next couple of years. And that's, depending on how large it is, it's only gonna hold us over for a period of time. And I wanna continue to be able to provide the level of services we've come accustomed to. So if we need to do an override that's going to result, or if we don't do the override, it's going to result in position losses, larger classrooms, less services, then I'm going to be in favor of passing that override because I don't want to lose what we have right now.
Okay. Michelle?
So technically, debt exclusions are not overrides. They're two different things. But as far as speaking to the permanent override, absolutely not. What we have available and what we need to spend our money on from year to year varies. So as we're anticipating increases in budget costs and we're getting those scary words of they're going to go for an override next year, we need to be more proactive than that. Rather than sort of planning for defeat and planning for failure, I think we need to start planning for success. So specifically speaking to the schools, we need to continue to support them and we need to increase our per pupil costs that we're putting in. The state has calculated the formula. We need to rise to meet that formula, and we need to do it without an override. We need to do it by also looking at different ways to fund our schools. So grant funding is something I just see vastly underutilized in Upton. I was very dismayed to hear the school system was looking for money for psychologists, and again, I keep getting the chatter thing at the back, was looking for money for school psychologists at the same time that there was a grant available for $100,000 for a school psychologist. So we need to be looking closely at those things and ways that we can support our services without going to an override, because once you have an override, you always have that override. And our budget flexes, usually going in the wrong direction for us every year, but we don't necessarily want to build a budget for 1 year and then be stuck with that budget forever.
Okay, great. All right. Next question, there was, yes, sir.
This is a question for all three candidates. Housing in Massachusetts is at a crisis level when it costs. Upton is an example of a community that's only built pretty much middle to upper class housing. What's your position about the community thinking about building a little more housing diversity and how that can impact what's going on in terms of our schools and funding? One of the things that hurts us on Chapter 70 every year with school funding is our household income goes through the roof every year, ticks up. So it puts every burden on the taxpayer from a residential standpoint.
Okay, great. So first now would be Dave. We'll start off with this one.
Yeah, I think that's a great question that's facing every town and city in the Commonwealth, all 351 of them. The developers now are only building large homes. There's no new developments going in of 50 ranch homes. and those starter homes or later in life homes, when people begin to downsize, aren't out there. And then that's the same problem you run into with a lot of your public employees who in Upton qualify for affordable housing. When people hear affordable housing, a lot of times they think this is Section 8 government housing. It's really housing to keep our young residents, our elderly residents, our teachers, our police officers, our firefighters, who are doing wonderful work for the community in town and as a member of the community. So I would look for being able to utilize something like a 40R smart growth district, where we change a number of the regulations and zoning requirements that say if a developer builds a certain amount of housing in this area, instead of being allowed so many units per acre, when you put a 40R smart growth district in, they can maybe instead of 4 units, put 8 units in there. And for every unit we build, the state gives us money for it. We implemented a similar program in Grafton. We're going to put a 40R district down where the old Fisherville mill used to be. Unfortunately, Grafton hasn't found a developer to actually build there in that area. But I think looking at areas like that, where not only are we just allowing the equivalent of a 40B to come in, but we're able to receive benefits from the state for doing this type of smart growth.
Okay. So, Michelle, remember you do have 2 minutes, so it's okay to see that.
I just get so nervous every time it flies up.
We just wave. The others are getting it too. You're just not seeing.
Oh, that makes it so
Not just you.
Okay, thank you. So great question. Absolutely, we need to look at diversity in housing. We need to encourage developers to come in here and offer smaller housing and move away from the McMansions. I think some of this is going to occur somewhat naturally as people are having smaller families, and they're going to, if we look internationally, we see that the smaller families, for instance, in Japan, and why I happen to know this, I don't even know, but the smaller families in Japan, their birth rate has dropped off so much that they're actually not replacing their population at a level that's going to sustain Japan as a nation. But that's beside the point. They're looking at smaller families, and we're sort of following suit. We're having the millennial generation are not having children, or not having as many children, and they're not having them as early as we traditionally did. So this is going to happen as a function of our population and how it's changing. But I would really like to look at the zoning overall in Upton and encourage smaller lot sizes so that people will build those smaller homes, and that will both offset the expenses at the school, as we appear to be sort of a poorer town. The state expectation for our contribution will decrease. So that will have a multi-level effect, but also will encourage young families to move into our town, and for us older folks to stay in town. And both are important to me.
Great.
I do believe in diversifying the housing. The over 55 housing would be better, I think, because they don't bring in the school children, which is an impact on our schools. 40Bs are, once you reach a 10% of your town being affordable, you get a lot of reimbursements from the state. I think McMansions are going to stay, but I would work towards working on the growth management of all the types of housing to keep the taxes down in the time and the burdens on services.
Okay, great. Right, next question. Sir, go ahead.
Sorry, second question. The big picture question. To each of you, what's your vision for the future of Upton in 20 words or less?
Well,
Essentially 15, but that might be a little more killer.
I don't have a sign that out.
well, it's spread those 20 words after 2 minutes if you really want to.
So I'll give you a
We
few
get
minutes
an
to...
ish.
So,
We can speak really slowly.
Okay, well, the future, Upton. So, Michelle, you can go first on this one.
Oh, goodness. Actually, I already answered this question to somebody today. I see Upton, what I would want for Upton is to be pretty much the community that it is today. A rural community, a community of New Englanders that care about one another even when we disagree with one another, a community of people that share common values of common American values, personal values of In Upton, we love our outdoor space, we love being outdoors, we love sharing time with one another. So physically, I would want to be, that's not 20 words, I'm so sorry.
4 bullet points though, you've got so far, so it's pretty good.
What was my last word? So basically, I would, I know we have to have some economic development. I would hope it would be small business. I would hope it would be supporting the services and interests that we have here in town. I would hope it would not be large supermarkets. And I would hope it would look very much the same, with lots of open space, with small, little stores with people that we know in them, the Coffee Bean, the Country Super. We go into these places all the time, we know everybody there. That's my vision, that's what I would love to see. Is it realistic? I'll leave that one to you, Dave.
I can get 20 out of that, thank you.
Alrighty, great. Maureen, you can go next.
We need to manage our growth to keep up with the services. And I believe that we can work with developers and be able to manage the growth, and not in a controlled manner, but manage it. Too much growth. We're seeing crucial times coming ahead. The next 10 years are going to be very crucial for the town of Upton. There's going to be a lot of more houses. I hear there's 3 projects going on in town now that have a couple hundred units. We need to get involved in doing what we can to manage it.
Great. Dave?
Yeah, I see Upton over the next 10, 20 years. I want it to become a vibrant community, a pedestrian-friendly community, a community that provides to its residents. I want it to be a community. And one of the things that appeals to me most about starting with the downtown center is to have one place where you go and you park your car and you're able to walk to the library or the senior center. You can walk over to the ball fields. You can go over to the Rose Garden. You can walk down the Country Super. You can have access up to Heritage Park. And then whatever other shops may be put in a redeveloped little strip there on 140. And to have a place where it's true community, where you go down there and you're able to talk and see each other. I understand the desire of living and moving to Upton because it's a bedroom community. But as we as a nation and as a society talk about being more green, should we have to get in our car and drive 15 miles just to pick up a roll of toilet paper? So I'm not promoting that we build the next giant Wegmans in town, even though I think my wife would love that. But I think, if we can add the right mix of shops and services in an area that also blends in some type of housing, it's walkable, you can access all the wonderful natural resources we have in this town, whether it's something as close as Heritage Park or Pratt Pond or being able to get out to the state forest and really take advantage of everything and be a true downtown community center. I think that would be wonderful.
Okay. Great. I know there was more than 20 words from each, but I think it's important that they give their true vision.
I don't know, Maureen got pretty close.
Any other questions?
The other large project that we're thinking about doing is a new DPW garage. If you had to choose between funding that or funding the library senior center, which one would be your priority?
Maureen, you're first up on this one.
The one that has the most need. I've been to the DPW meeting and Bill, it's pretty sad. And I know that the library is crunched for space. In order to keep our public safety going, I think we're going to have to go with the DPW.
Okay, next is going to be Dave. You're on this one.
Yeah, to expand on it a little bit, when I was in Grafton, one of the things we did, we were going to have library, DPW, and a number of other facilities coming up. We pulled all the boards and commissions together. There was about 75 people in a room, and we did it a couple of times. And we mapped off when our debt would be rolling off. And we said, based on when our debt rolls off so that we don't really impact the taxpayers, we're going to have an opportunity to build a building in 2015, 2020, 2025. And we got everybody in the room to agree what our needs were, and as that group to say the most important building we have, and we chose library first, because we were going for the state library reimbursement grant. It was gonna slot in here, everybody get behind that, knowing that DPW was gonna be in this period and so forth. And we patched some improvements at the DPW to get them through that time period. So I'd like to do something similar to that, where we're able to go out and present and say, we're building this building, minimal impact, hopefully none on your tax rate, or maybe even it goes down, because we're replacing this debt here, and we're not gonna come back until our next piece of debt comes down, and it's going to be in this time period. And if that's DPW, guys, get your ducks in a row, so when we go to town meeting, you're ready to go there. Based on who is serviced on a daily basis and what the needs are, I would be inclined at this time to support the library over the DPW.
So I'm going to look at Paul on this one because I think he was present at a committee meeting that multiple committees were represented. And I know FinCom was there, I believe. I'm not sure if BOS was there, but basically this question was discussed. What's next in the priority list? And the committee members that were there identified that the library was next in the, and I'm sorry, I don't have my notes to look through and tell you exactly who was present. So we did do something as what Dave was describing. We did have input from various committees, and the library was identified as next on the needs list. I support the library as next on the needs list because it's not accessible, and that is the one thing in town that no matter who you are, what you do, what you can do, what you can't do, what your limitations are, that's the one place that you can be 100% included. And that's really important. We have people in our community that can't get out to go places, and they can't get into the library right now. We have people with, my heart is with the special needs populations, and that's one place where everybody goes in on equal footing and you do the same things and have fun and be included. So absolutely 100% the library. The Council of Aging, the Senior Center is on borrowed time. We don't know when that clock runs out, and I'll be frank, I don't know much about the DPW Center. I haven't been down there to look around, but I'm happy to help them sort of, as Dave talked about, get them through until we can get them next on our priorities list. But I didn't identify that priority. It was identified within that committee, but I do support the outcome.
Okay, great. All right, any more questions? Go first and do next up. Go ahead.
I was wondering what your thoughts are on protection and acquisition of open space?
Open space, okay. Dave, you're up first on this one.
So I'm in favor of acquiring pieces of land that are large and contiguous with other pieces that we own. If the opportunity comes up to buy 5 acres of land that is kind of standalone in a neighborhood, I feel we should pass on that, especially if it's a buildable lot and 1 or 2 homes can be put in there and we can increase tax revenue. If we have the opportunity to acquire a piece of land that is adjacent, say, to Upton State Forest, to allow for that large open space to be enhanced a little bit more, I would be in favor of investigating that, potentially using CPC funds as a way to acquire land like that. I don't think the town should jump at every piece of land that comes on the market. I think we should have some type of strategy behind it, our open space planning plan, and we should look to follow that.
Okay. Michelle, you can next on this one.
So I love the open space that we have, and we have quite a bit of it. We also have access to the Upton State Forest. Personally, we have a little bit of open space around our house, and I find it highly attractive, and I find it, I don't know, it feeds my soul. So like Dave, I think it's really important that we be proactive, and I believe there is an open space plan or master plan in development. I think we need to adhere to what that committee is working on, and I support those efforts.
Okay. All right.
I would also have to see what the open space plan is for the future. I do believe in purchasing open space if it's contiguous to bigger parcels. I also think about conservation land too. And open space is nice to have. Where I live, it's pretty much open space, and I love it.
Okay, great. Another question. Yes, right there.
Hi, Lynn Haggerty. How many hours, this is to all the candidates, how many hours a week do you plan to invest in Board of Selectmen duties?
Okay, so get some background noise. Number of hours a week do you think you'll have to plan on giving to the Board of Selectmen? So, Michelle, you'll be the first one to address this.
So I've been given a lot of thought to that whole question because I am absolutely invested in doing the best I can for Upton, and my estimate, I've asked, as a junior select person, what is the number of hours, and I've gotten both the figure of 15 to 20 and 10 to 15. For me, I actually plan and can commit to more than that because one of the commitments that I'm willing to make here tonight is to attend the meetings of all the committees with whom I would be the liaison. The committee meetings that meet every week, maybe not so much, but certainly on a regular basis that they could count on me to be there and that I could count on them to share what is important and what's happening on their committee. So I'm estimating realistically 20 to 25 hours a week.
All right.
Well, I'm retired, so I can invest lots of hours, which I did even when I was working. And I will do whatever it takes to get the job done.
Okay. Dave?
Yeah, I think there's no specific number you can put on it. I know when I was on the board in Grafton, there were weeks it was 20 to 30 hours, and then other weeks, July 4th week, it was almost none. So it really depends on the week. There were Sunday mornings where after a storm happened and you had to go out and review damage that happened, people would call and talk to you and you put that time in. Different weeknights you have to be out and so forth. So, I'll put in what's required of the job. I think one of the nice things about it being a board of 3 is there's some, you can run afoul of Mass General Law if all 3 of you show up and discuss something that's not posted, but you're able to pass things out. And I can go to this meeting tonight and another member can go to a different meeting or to an Eagle Scout rank board or something like that. So I'm committed to being able to go out there and do that. This was a full family decision, obviously having a young family, but my wife and I haven't gone through it before. We knew what was required to be able to do this position, and I wouldn't get in here and do this just to show up Tuesday night for 2 hours.
So, any comment?
Say what?
We bet?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Please, you have 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Yes.
So one thing I didn't speak about when I was thinking about my commitment of 25 hours per week is that I have that time available to me, thank God, because of menopause. And all of you women out there know that you're not sleeping and you're up all hours of the night. And that's when I expect to do a lot of this work, is doing the reading and preparation. So thank goodness there's an asset to take out of menopause.
Okay, so, Dave, you have anything to say to that?
Well, I have a 7-week-old, so I'm all hours of the night. We can text each other.
Are we going to be fun to do this?
My kids are all grown up, my grandkids are grown up, and my great-grandkids are getting grown up.
All right, that's great. Okay, good. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask, it's a 2-part question.
Okay.
Because that's just the way it is.
But you got 1 minute to ask both parts.
What?
You have 1 minute total.
Okay. We are talking about spending a lot of money to build a combined community center, senior center downtown, or library downtown. My concern is, number 1, how do those seniors that live up at Millhouse get to that place? And number 2, how many people are really using the library anymore when we all have computers at home? Because I have to say, every time I've ever gone into the library, seriously, there is more staff than customers.
Okay. So, senior center downtown versus the library. Let's see. Maureen, you're first on this one.
Well.
Just worked out that way.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. You need to keep the seniors close to the center so that they at least walk to. Other than that, they would have to travel, we'd have to supply a bus for them to travel downtown to get to the senior center and then send the bus back to pick them up. And I don't think that's the right thing to do right now. I think a senior center should be closest to where the seniors are.
Thank you.
All right, Dave? You're next on this.
Yeah, so we do have a number of seniors that live at the Millhouse complex, but we're projected with adding all these 55 and plus over communities in town to have upwards of 1,500 people that qualify as seniors in town. They can't all fit into the Millhouse solution. We do currently have the Council on Aging van that runs for different trips. I'm sure we could probably work out that you know, at 2-3 times a day, 8, 9, 10 a.m. drives down and then can return people later in the day. You know, and as far as the library, I agree that there's a lot of times you can just order stuff online or you read things on your Kindle. But having young children, every time we go to the library, you know, I walk out with a full bag full of books and stuff like that. The kids love it, and a library is now more than just books. And what we're looking potentially with that joint building, although we're calling it a library because that's where the books will be stored, there's a lot of programs that they run for our new moms in town, for our teens in town. There are the opportunity to have rooms that are meeting spaces for our different scout troops, or if the Little League needs a place to meet and so forth like that. So I really think library, senior center, we're looking at that committee, I think is actually called the Municipal Center Feasibility Committee, because we're building a community center or municipal center here that happens to have a library within it and a senior center within it, along with other features.
Okay. Michelle.
So to Dave's point, absolutely, the demographics in our town are changing, and we have the over 55 housing going in. So our senior and our picture of who a senior is unfortunately going to include me very soon. So yes, absolutely, accessibility to the senior center is going to be key. I would support, and if there's any way we can manage it, and I'm not sure there is because I'm hearing that there isn't, to retain some sort of satellite senior center for the people that are at Millhouse who would be unable to travel downtown or would be unwilling or would be uncomfortable and challenging for them. But I do understand we're on borrowed time in that space, and we may not have that option, but I would totally support that option. The library, as Dave pointed out, is changing, and I actually did go into our library recently, and I was actually surprised to see how many people were sitting at the very few computers, and there were a couple people leaning up against the wall waiting for computers. So as much as we think, I mean, I have a Kindle, I have my laptop, but I still love paper books. I love touching them, and I know that that's not conservation friendly. But I also know that that's a reading choice and a reading style that a lot of people still make. I'm fortunate I can go out and buy my books. That's not true of everybody here in town. And to Dave's point also, that's the place where new moms come into town or new dads come into town with their little ones and they're looking to connect. So we do need to support the library. Is it going to be book heavy or, well, it will be book heavy, but is it going to be a place where everybody's picking up books? Not so much, and I think the vision that we have for our new center is different, and it's going to incorporate all of the different programs. And I like the idea of calling it a cultural center rather than a library and rather than a senior center.
Okay, great, good, just about there. Great, next question. It's almost 8 o'clock, but that's fine, because as long as you have questions, we'll keep going, so go ahead.
I just have a quick question for Mrs. Donnell. The senior center, the current senior center is in a leased space. It could be sold at any time, you could be given notice, and they're gonna have to move. So where would you put it if you don't wanna put it downtown?
Okay, so, all right, good.
Well, I would look at other lots of land available that the town owns. I believe there's land out in back there that they could put up a senior center.
Back of where?
In back of where the mill house is now, there's land out there, which isn't as far as downtown.
Okay, great. Do either one of you want to address that question, Bob, or not? Just for her, but-
Well, I mean, honestly, I think the minute you leave the mill house, depending on who you are, it's a journey. So even if it's very close nearby, out and back of where the mill house is. It's still a journey. And so whether you get in the van and you go a quarter of a mile, or you come downtown, or you go to, you know, Westboro Road where we have lots of space, it's still going to be a journey.
Okay, Dave, would you like to address this question?
One thing I would say is a lot of the talk and the preference seems to be to locate it downtown. But if we were to explore this joint building, and if we could potentially call it a cultural center, the town is in the process of, for lack of a better term, inheriting some land on Mendon Street, which is across from St. Gabriel's. It does have a educational, recreational, I'm blanking on the term for it, restriction on that land, but you could potentially argue that a cultural center is educational, and to be able to place it there with ball fields and parks might also be a very attractive idea. So, but both of those would require building new, which we need to start thinking now. You can't get evicted and then, you know, build something in 3 weeks and be there.
Any other questions? Okay,
Two things. We are at the point where we need to be talking about a new license for cable access television in Upton. Upton as a town has a license, or grants a license to Charter. And by the way, anybody else that's willing to come to town. But be that as it may, in course of relicensing a provider such as Charter, we have to negotiate some terms and conditions, one of which would be the value that we ask Charter to provide to local access television to support people like me and gadgets like that, along with other stuff. Question is, how much would you like to ask the town for to support that kind of thing? Second question is, where would you house the facility to do broadcast production of studio stuff?
Okay, great. Just got it out. Okay, Dave, you're first on this one.
No, I think that's a great question, and a lot of people in today's age are very dependent on some form of communication. And obviously local cable access is very important for us to get messaging out. There's a lot of great programming we do on there, and people also require their internet and their phone, and with the cable being here, it obviously opens up those opportunities to have some competition between some of the local vendors. You know, I'd be all for asking Charter to kick something in or to provide a piece of the pie to us for that. As for having a studio space, right now we're using some space on the second floor of the Racine building. We're projected in the downtown revisioning to still maintain the Racine building and keep that after the library potentially moves out. I think what I would be in favor of exploring is, can we work with Charter to really build out a state-of-the-art studio space within the Racine building?
Great. Michelle, next.
Okay, so as I'm thinking about what Dave said and thinking about your question, Glenn, I see cable access as key right now. We're in the information age, and yet here in Upton, we have a very difficult time communicating what's going on, when it's happening, where it's happening, who's involved, and what's needed. It's crazy. It's almost like we have too many ways to communicate, and nobody is using just one, and we're not communicating very well at all. So I see cable access, and I see these types of live streaming and recordings of our town meetings and of our Board of Selectmen meetings and many more meetings as being a key way that we can communicate with everybody in town. As Dave was thinking, you know, one of my concerns is if we don't build the downtown library center and it remains where it is, that building will need to be renovated. And one of the plans in renovation is to actually kick you guys out. So in the event that happened, I know that they're thinking also of possibly moving the museum to the town hall, but also, you know, that's a pretty big space, and I would see that possibly we could fit a really nice state-of-the-art, you know, getting some money out of Charter or whatever, whoever we negotiate with, and getting a really good space in there. But honestly, I don't know enough about what you would need in order to identify the best place for it.
Okay.
Charter pays subscriber fees, correct?
Yes.
And where does that money go? That goes for this gadget
Well,
here?
Charter charges you a subscriber fee to pay for this kind of stuff. It goes to the town buys the stuff.
I thought that it was the other way around, that Charter pays the subscriber fees.
Charter pays the town.
Charter pays the town to purchase the equipment. Do they supply the equipment?
No. Years ago they did, no longer.
So we'd have to negotiate then with Charter to provide the equipment and possibly put it in the building that Michelle was talking
They'll
about.
provide the money, not the equipment.
We have to sort of have you answer the
No
question.
back and
I want to minimize that if at all possible, so thank you. If you want more time, let's do it. But if you don't want it, that's fine too. Okay. All right. Great. Any other questions? Yeah, maybe one more. Go ahead.
Earlier, they were asking about the number of meetings people attend, and a lot of people attend meetings, and I guess you meet people there. Maureen, you mentioned that in addition to going to Board of Selectmen meetings, you've been talking to department managers, but what about getting out to the community? How do you expect to reach out and communicate with the citizens?
Is this a question for all three? Or,
sure.
Okay, so since it's for all three, Michelle, you address this one first.
Oh,
Yeah, I was
directed at me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Either way, it kind of was, so that's fine. Yeah, I would. Okay.
Wake up.
Go ahead. You can take this one up.
You said it.
I've been
That's okay. That's all right.
I've been a resident going on 19 years in Upton. And when I moved from Hopkinton, I promised my husband I wouldn't get involved in politics. Since I kept up, I watched the meetings, I have kept up with what's going on in town, but sadly my husband passed away and I'm just getting back involved in it. And I am a people person. I love to talk to people. I would be available. They can call me, they can email me, they can do whatever they want. I will always, always, always respond to people.
Thank you. Anyone even want to respond to that particular question, or?
So I think I addressed it by saying that I would remain active on the committees that I'm already active on, and that I would attend the meetings for the liaison, well, at least those meetings, because some of them I'm just nosy about, so I would probably end up going to other people's meetings as well. But I would also encourage anybody, if you see me in the community, you see me at the Super at the Bean, to come up and talk to me. I'm actually very shy, and I know that seems really weird, but it's true. So I'm never going to assume that you want me to come up and talk to you about something. So if I sit there and I look a little goofy, it's because I am a little goofy. But come on over and introduce yourself, and whatever way we can communicate, I'm happy to do.
You know, my number is listed in the book. If you're on the Board of Selectmen, you have a town email. I'm on Facebook, around town. One of the things that we did in Grafton is we had selectmen hours. It's similar to what Senator Moore does or Rep Meridian does. And I'd be open to trying something like that, to say, you know, a member of the board is going to just be located here at different times during the week and see what people show up. One of the things we found in Grafton is you got the same 6 people that showed up. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are very cavalier about town government. We have 8,000 residents in this town, not all of them voting age, but this room has 50 people in it tonight. You know, and that's a little sad that we don't get more turnout. We had 266 people, I think, decide whether or not we were going to maintain our trash service in this town. And if we had decided not to, there'd probably be a couple hundred people in this town going, what happened? But it's kind of their own fault for not, you know, being involved and showing up. So, you know, I make myself available. I put my information out there, and I'm willing, and my wife can attest from my time before on boards, you know, I will take calls and talk to people for as long as it takes. I do find myself that I can be a chatterbox at times if you get me going. So, you know, on the campaign trail last weekend, I think on Saturday I was out for 6 hours and I maybe met with 10 people because half-hour conversations. I was like, I sure hope I got your vote because I spent a lot of time talking to you. But I love making those connections and getting to know people and really understanding, you know, what's at the root of the issue.
Okay, great. Okay, so what we're just about shyness, I wouldn't worry about that. I was watching a show last night about Cher. I guess she was shy until she met Sonny, so. Okay, so.
Well, he looks like Sonny, but he's much taller.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, if there aren't any, oh, sir, go ahead.
I have a comment first. You know, I have a brand new revenue stream.
You got 1 minute.
If we charge people running for office or we tax them by word, we actually we wouldn't have to worry about Prop 2.5 anymore.
I can't support that.
Thank you, Mr. Missouri. All right, great. Okay, that's a good way to wrap things up. So I want to start off by saying all three of you did a great job tonight. Thank you very much. I want everyone to give them Now, typically I ask a question at the end, and there are times I really need to ask this question because things can get really tense, but that didn't happen. The questions were great, the answers were great, but you know what? I'm going to ask it anyways because I have a feeling that we're going to hear some really good things. So here's my final question that I ask every year. I want each of you, you've gotten to know each other for the last couple of months, each of you tell something positive about your opponents that you want to share with the audience and with the folks at home. So who wants to go first on that?
I'll go first.
Michelle, go ahead.
So I've worked with Dave on the Economic Development Committee, and I very much enjoyed working with him. He is absolutely, he keeps saying, I'm not wedded to this. So he takes suggestions and feedback really well, and he's a pleasure to work with.
Great.
And I'm sorry, I don't know Maureen really well, so, but I've heard great things about her from other people here in town and how they think we're more alike than different. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. Dave or Maureen?
I'd like to. I know Dave is a hard worker, very respectful, very polite. We were together on cleanup day as well as Michelle. And they were all positive. They're both positive people, and they work hard at what they do, and it's pretty demanding.
Okay, good. All right, Dave?
Yeah, I have nothing but respect for the two of them to, as the moderator said, to put your name out there and to sit up here knowing that based on the odds, there's a better chance you're not going to get elected. And to put all your beliefs out there for people to scrutinize and say you're wrong or that's crazy, it takes a lot of guts. And you know, I know Maureen knows that, having done that before. Michelle did this last year and came back for more. So, you know, it says a lot about their character. And you know, if the election doesn't go my way and either of them get elected, you know, I'm going to support them in their job, because you don't run for this and put yourself out there unless you really care about your community. And obviously, all of us do.
Thank you all very much, and I know those of you who know me, who've seen these for many years, know I always ask this question, and because I just feel it's an important thing to think about. I'm not asking it now this year because of all sorts of stuff that's going on in the nation, but I guess in some respects it's a necessary thing for us to think about, because we are a community, and we have to work together. We just can't be yelling and screaming at each other and tweeting and all this other stuff. We have to work here, because this is where we live, and we are all neighbors to each other. So that's just my last little comment about that. So again, thank you all three very much. You've done an excellent job, Matt, but we do have closing remarks, so we'll get ready for that. And again, thank you, audience, for asking great questions. They were really good questions. I appreciate that. Okay, so the order for the closing remarks, Michelle, you're going to give the first closing
You
remarks?
stole my thing, it was about
2 minutes.
unity, thanks so much.
Well,
So, but I can say something you can't say.
All right, go ahead.
So I'm asking for your vote for Board of Selectmen for several reasons, but I also think it's key to sort of recognize one of the skill sets that I bring that the board doesn't currently have, and that's the woman's perspective. I'm an experienced mom. I raised my daughters here in Upton, and I understand what it's like to be a mom with small children and not knowing people, and I understand what it's like to be a mom of a teenager, and hoping nobody, well, we won't go there, sorry girls. And I also, we are small animal farmers. We have miniature horses and goats, so I well understand the agricultural and the conservation perspectives here in Upton. I have a couple of promises to make if I'm elected. One is to publish my cell phone number, because I believe in being fully available to people. And the second one I've sort of made several times, which is that I'll continue to attend the meetings for the committees on which I would be the liaison, and also to maintain my committee work. I think we need to decide our future. We need to decide that we're back in charge of our government. We need to decide that we want people to be respectful to us and to welcome our questions and to be civil and to be supportive of participation. We're all in this together. It's really important that we recognize that each one of us counts and that each one of us needs our help. When I'm elected, I'm ready to hit the ground running. I've done my work, my homework over this past year. Politics here in Upton are not politics at large. We have a very different community. We have a small community. We can't afford to make any financial mistakes in the next couple of years. We don't have room in our budget to make mistakes, so we need to be thinking of that. So as we go forward from tonight, I hope, wrap it up. I hope that everybody recognizes that we still have work to do. If we're not elected, I'm still on 2 committees, and I've asked to be named to the Disability Commission. So I'm here for Upton, and I know that you are too, so thank you.
I gave her a little extra time, so if you need more than 2 minutes, that's okay. Maureen, go ahead.
But you're going to be taxed on those words. Rich is
Go ahead.
I would like to be voted in the selectmen because I think I have the experience. I've been in government for 27 years in municipal government, 27 years as treasurer collector, 6 years as selectman, the state elected member to the transportation for Middlesex County. I've been on all the growth managements, board of directors before '95. I worked 15 years managing finances in the town of Hopkinton for a AAA rating. And I feel that I could do that for the town of Upton. And in conclusion, I would like to say that all departments, boards, and committees should show unity, because it works and bodes well for the town.
Thank you. Okay, Dave, go ahead.
Thanks for all coming tonight. Thanks to the Bloomer Girls once again for hosting this event. I have over a decade of experience in serving in a number of different roles in the public sector, municipal side. I have a lot of experience in the financial and facility and operations side in the private sector. And I plan to take all of that and promise you that I will listen to what everybody has to say. And I will listen to all sides of the argument. I come in no predetermined viewpoints. I'm going to do what I hear what the residents want to do. I have suggestions to make based on what I've seen and experienced. And there are areas that maybe we can improve. But I'm not going to come in with an iron fist and say we need to do this or we need to change that. I'm going to first understand why we do something a certain way and why we shouldn't maybe change it, or maybe why we should be changing it. And then, with that information armed, share that reasoning with you so that we all come to a consensus vote and we're able to make the changes we need to make. So my promise to you, I can't give out my cell phone because it's a corporate phone, sorry. My home phone is, as I said, listed, so you can call the home. But my promise to you is to listen and to hear what everybody has to say and to make a uniform decision on every decision that we make. So I politely ask for your vote on Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, and again, great night, great evening. Let's give all three candidates a quick round. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Good night. Thank you.